Dr. Ron, we are talking about the term Namaste.
Namaste is going to be a great topic for today.
It is this Hindu Sanskrit word. It's permeated American culture. Are you going to leave? Nah, I'm going to stay.
I'm going to stay. I like that.
Nobody really knows what it means. We all say it in yoga. Actually, who knows? I don't even know if people say it in yoga because I don't know if anyone listening does yoga. But I've said it in yoga, and I have no idea what it means, and it makes me feel uncomfortable, and I don't even know why I'm doing it.
Feels curious to a lot of people, especially those that are first time jumping in, like you're saying, to yoga. And you have this yoga instructor that seems somewhat contrarian to popular culture, and they're holding their hands close together and toward their chest and bowing towards you and saying in a very ethereal way something that seems like they're really trying to convey to you. And it bounces right off of you oftentimes, right? That was strange.
There's an internal discomfort if you've grown up going to church every Sunday. Does this exist in some other plane? Is this able to be reconciled with my background, even if I no longer practice my faith? It feels other than, and it is curious.
And I think part of that is our lack of familiarity with being willing to approach feelings and emotions in our culture.
What are those?
Right. And I think, though, because we've had more difficulty discussing or even expressing emotion. I mean, there are some cultures on earth that embrace each other with a kiss, male and female, right?
Are we talking about a peck on the lips here? What kind of kiss are we talking
kiss
about?
On the cheek, usually,
okay.
Right? And oftentimes it'll be a kiss on each cheek. But that's pretty intimate. That's pretty close, and we can throw that off and say, oh, that's just tradition. But okay, well, is it tradition, and what does it mean, and why would it be necessary to demonstrate a level of familiarity or comfort to that degree? Why can't you just say hi? Why can't you just do the whole chin nod, right? Or as most of us in Western culture in the United States, why can't we just at the very most shake hands or bump fists? Why doesn't that work? I recognize you. Nice to meet you.
When I first came into the office, I approached this as I'm going to the chiropractor, but very soon after that, I realized there was a lot more going on inside your practice. And there's a sign hanging up that says, Namaste, I honor the place in you in which the entire universe dwells. I honor the place in you which is love, light, peace, and joy. In that place in me, we are one.
And this refers to the universal nature of the spirit, or the universal nature of the energy that permeates through the world, right? Our Mother Earth has an energetic vibration that influences us significantly. We know that people listening to sounds of water and birds can actually regulate their heart rhythms. Their biorhythms can be influenced by that as well. So we know that there's a lot of physiological effects that can take place simply by tapping into the energy of nature. Well, that energy is vibrant in all of us as well. And we can describe it in so many different ways. On religious tones, we tend to heist that energy and suggest that we have placed a flag atop the pole, on the top of a pole that stands on top of a mountain and says, this is what it is, period, end of story. And I think when we sit down, even from a religious sense, and recognize or begin to even think about what is this energy that permeates us in a lot of religious circles, they call it spirit, right? But we would recognize that there's a whole lot more we have to learn and that we don't entirely know that connects all of us on a universal level. There's far more similarity to our interactions and the influence that the world and nature can have on our bodies than there are differences. So namaste essentially is two derivatives or of words, two different words that come together. Te being more of a reference to you, and namas being a reference to the divine or divinity or the child within you. And so really when we say namaste, we're referencing or acknowledging the divine that is in you. And I think that that's a critical thing, because in Western culture or in religious cultures, they'll often say that we should treat others the way we want to be treated, right? Well, why would we treat others the way we want to be treated unless we recognize that they were in some way like us, right? Or that their emotions or their core or their desires were not in some way like us. Well, they are, and it's a recognition ultimately that the peace within you that created and brought you to this experience is also in some way the same as that peace that brought me here.
Is there an acknowledgement in Namaste of the other first? Or is it honoring that in you and then honoring that in someone else? And that's maybe pedantics, but I just sort of wonder if it's the other person and the entire world first and then you, or vice versa, or at the same time.
It's not a one before the other. Yeah, and I think that's a great question, because we do that oftentimes we may come across more better. We may come across in a better light, or we may come across in a way that is considered more generous or honorable if we put someone or suggest that we're putting someone before ourselves, right? It becomes very virtuous of us to do that.
We learn how to do that in basic grammar.
Yeah. Right? We put someone else first.
John and I are going to the store. You don't say,
me and John.
Me and John. You're not supposed to put yourself first. You put yourself after the other person. So it seems proper anyway.
Yeah, well, you need to hang out a lot more in rural areas. Okay. And you'll learn that it doesn't matter necessarily. Right? I'm teasing that. I'm poking fun.
You're of the rural world.
Yes,
you
I
drove
am.
your pickup truck in high school and
love it.
Do you
with the I won't mention that now, but anyway, I was gonna say, when I was a kid, there were rifles in the back, right? That were just displayed in the back of the truck.
That was the way it was.
Yep.
In high school, driving away to the school, and we don't need to go there today. But yeah. I do want to ask you about Namaste, because yoga is sort of this regular thing in America now, but it didn't always exist. The Hindu tradition. What is Namaste done for the culture, do you think? And what do you think people out there should know? I think you've done a nice job of explaining it so far.
Well, the interesting thing about Eastern culture is, and I think that in general, there's a recognition among groups at large that at least start off in a very genuine way, suggesting that there's something that connects us all, there's something that unites us all, and there's actually something more than us all, or something beyond us all, right? And it is something that allows us to enter into reflection, like self-reflection. It's something that maybe triggers us to reevaluate things, and determine whether or not we entered into the appropriate level of kindness, you could say, or delivered the appropriate level of generosity, right, or hospitality. And I think there's an interesting, and I know we're talking about Namaste, which is a very Eastern Hindu-focused approach to this idea, but it permeates all cultures, and I've mentioned religion too, and there's actually a story where Abraham and Sarah have visitors that come to them, and this is ancient Old Testament. And they have these visitors come to them, and when you read about psychologists who have looked at and studied why was this story placed in the Bible, they have a method of interpretation. There's another, when you look at religious scholars, they look at this as well, and they say, okay, this was a recognition of Abraham, of God in man form. So they were suggesting, well, God was in the form of a man, and there were 3 visitors, and they came, and Abraham went out and greeted them, which the traditional custom of the day was to stand at your porch and allow the visitors to come and then to welcome them in. But he showed an additional heaping of hospitality and went out to greet them and then placed them under a tree in his area, or in his yard area, I guess. Said they could rest there while he prepared some meal and food for him. So he was very hospitable. But I think that the key to us, and when you look at some of the psychological interpretation of that as well, it's a suggestion of how we should treat those that we interact with in life, how we should treat strangers, perhaps, or how we should treat visitors that we have, and we should treat them, ultimately, this story is suggesting, in a very hospitable manner. Well, how do we learn that level of hospitality to others? We can do it simply by just action, or we can do it by recognizing that there is a divinity to all, right? The interesting thing is the Sanskrit, when you go back to the Sanskrit, these terms that they use, the te and the nama, it was more like a familiar. It wasn't a formal term, like introducing somebody that you'd never met formally, but it was more of a familiar term, like a friend or a colleague, right? And so we have to be able to recognize that these individuals that we're interacting with in life have a familiarity to ourselves. And that familiarity is within the divine. It's to the divine. And regardless of the actions or the behaviors or even the desires of the others that we see, it's important for us to recognize, okay, there is divinity in all. And that ultimately is uniting Namaste and other religions, you could say.
So much of all this, I think, is a practice and continuing to practice. And no relationship is good if you do one thing right the first time. You're not going to work out once and have a body that's maybe in shape. And life is like that too. You got to keep showing up, and that's fine. There's never really an end. And I think practicing whatever it is, something that embodies Namaste or gratitude, something that continues to remind you, and also just acting as if, right? Just doing it every day and trying to be warm to people. But I never even knew what Namaste meant. And after I saw the sign on your wall, I hadn't been to yoga in like 3 years after COVID, but went to this hot yoga, went on a date with a lady, said, let's go to yoga. I said, why not, And at the end, I was just dead. All the sweat was pouring out of me. Water bottle was gone in 10 minutes. It was an hour-long class. But I was feeling it, and by the end I was a little loopy. But when we all said Namaste, I just felt like this mushroom cloud of energy. And I was like, whoa, we are all one. And I know that sounds kind of out there to people, but I felt it. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of special. And I wonder, as a Westerner, how presumptuous it sounds to say, we are one with God. We are all of him. It is all one. It sort of sounds like hippy-dippy talk. And if that may be true, which is sort of what I believe, can that be reconciled with, I don't know, a more traditional Western Christian, go to church every Sunday kind of faith?
Well, sure. I think absolutely. My answer to that would be why not? And why would somebody of a Christian faith not be interested in exercising and showing the greatest amount of hospitality to those they meet and work with? In fact, they do, and these are some of the greatest tenets of Christian faith: is to help the stranger along the road, right? And I'm forgetting the name of this tale at the moment, but it's the Good Samaritan. That's the name of it, right? And
that's one that even I know.
Yeah,
you know?
and in fact, the Good Samaritan is written into our laws, the laws of our country, right? And the laws of even actions and behaviors of individuals who are hoping to do something good. There are Samaritan laws written to say, hey, this person can be protected in a court of law if there's anything that comes against them because of the intent of which they were for which they were acting. Okay, so it's a very Christian notion to suggest that we want to reach out and to express hospitality to those around us, and to convey that we are no different than they, right? Which is, in this Good Samaritan parable, essentially the idea is that this Samaritan of Samaria, which a Jewish culture had considered dirty and unclean, the people at large, right? And we're not really supposed to interface, do business, marry, any of those things, because these people were considered to this, to some degree, unclean. And yet here, this parable presented by Yeshua was to pull at this specific piece of society that needed to be tweaked or changed. And that was that, listen, they're no different than you, and you're no different than them. And the reality is, the divine that is in you and that you're seeking for and that you're praying for and that you're doing all of these other tasks in your life to try to get towards, they have that divinity too. And so it connects you with the humblest, the lowest and vilest of sinners, and it connects you with the, whatever that word means, by the way, okay? But that's a very religious term, but even the dirtiest of lowest of negative energy type individuals that you can imagine, and even the highest enlightened, most glorious beings you can imagine. It connects us all.
Yeah, I was watching this Sadhguru video, the guru online with millions of subscribers, and he mentioned there's no good or bad people. Mm-hmm. That people who do good things more than they do bad things can be considered good, and people who do a lot of bad things can do one amazing act. And I thought that was interesting because my kids will talk about the bad guys and the cops and everything, and I try to explain to them, well, there's no such thing as good or bad people. Some people tend to do certain things more than others. You mentioned sinners, and so I just thought about that.
Yeah.
It's an interesting way to, in totality, label people as the bad guys.
Mm-hmm. Well, and if you step into a faith, and I'm not meaning to pull a ton of faith or religion into this,
but there's like thousands of years distilled for a reason. I have to think, and I'm not saying it's all right or perfect, but it's still here probably for a reason. Whether you believe it or not, it's interesting to study it.
Yeah, and it's almost like all of these little ideas are approximating something that we all agree with. It's all the same is what we're pointing at, right? This divinity. Some people will say, oh, God or Allah or whatever. I believe that they're all the same, that we're all pointing at the same thing, right? So yes, sinners ultimately is all of us, like you're pointing out, because where do you fall on this line of how many things you maybe fell off the wagon from, and then how many things you think you did perfectly well, and what makes you think that you can even be a judge of what those things are? I think
Ego?
Something. I don't know.
We all believe we're pretty special, don't we? We all think we're kind of exceptional. And there's a humility that comes with realizing that we're all one, which is nice. And I know I'm sort of sidetracking what you're saying, but I wonder from your perspective as a healer, what health benefits can be achieved by practicing this sense of like we are all one, and what does that mean for someone's mental health?
Yeah. So we are in this country in a significant place with regards to mental health. Lots of higher and higher rates of depression, higher and higher rates of anxiety, suicidal ideation. There's a significant amount of trauma, emotional and psychological, that is being experienced by youth and adults. And how we begin to grasp that. Why do we feel like this is it? It's not worth it anymore. Or I'm not sufficient enough. Why do we feel that way? Well, it's because we create boundaries, exceptions, and distinctions in a significant way between us. And we create more of the us versus them mentality. And sports, I believe, ultimately was developed as a means of entertainment and fun and activity and bonding and actual unification. It developed into a us versus them mentality and developed into a situation where certain people, if their team loses, they have a really bad day, have a hard time interacting with their wife, or their husband, have a hard time interacting properly with their kids, and maybe are acting out some behavioral tendencies and patterns that are not healthy. Well, in fact, they are not healthy, right? Because the context of that whole game, that whole idea is really just not a healthy thing for us. It's fine to compete. It's fine to score goals. It's fine to, in fact, not only fine, but it's great to have goals. It's great to have things that you wish to achieve. But the question is, how can you score a goal and ultimately recognize as well the value and the skill and the work that maybe the opponent put into and made when they score a goal?
And what's so interesting is you can come at these things from a million different perspectives. We're talking about Namaste and the Hindu Sanskrit tradition and acknowledging the humanity and the divinity in your opponent who you just scored a goal on. Or we may have a term in Western society about good sportsmanship.
Yes.
I mean, it's not like we're oblivious to what the ideal is, like to
We
be a
say
good
it.
sport.
We say it, but do we act it, right? Are we and do we really internalize it, right? The good sportsmanship is ultimately playing the game.
Rather be a winner than a good sport. I don't need the Walter Payton Award. Let me win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, right.
That's the mentality in America. I actually feel that. I always
see
think
those
the Walter
rings,
Payton
baby.
guy.
See those rings?
Yeah, that's cool. That's celebrated.
Yeah. Well, and it is cool. It is great. It is great for him to have achieved that, for them to achieve that. That is great. It's great for you to look at your neighbor and to be excited for them to have achieved something great. That's a wonderful thing. And it's just as great for you to go out and achieve something great, which the sky's the limit. Your desire, your interests is the guide. And you looking over the fence where the grass may be greener is not necessarily the guide. Usually that's the deterrence. The deterrence is, they seemed to get to a place where they're more successful than I, quicker than I, but I feel like I should be there, and I probably will be there, but my journey seems different. My road seems shaped differently.
Most people stop, though, about 3 sentences before that. They stop before they say, I will get there, because they just compare themselves to others, harboring negative emotions, and I feel like they get stuck there.
Yeah, and then
they attach themselves to that cycle.
They just wind and wind up in that cycle, right? And then you can find more and more and more and more examples in life of people that seem to be doing things better than you. You can find that all day long if that's what you're looking for and if that's what you want to focus on. But is that recognizing the divinity? It's you seeing the divinity. It's you seeing that this person has actually activated some of the divinity and reached a level of success that you're acknowledging, but are you celebrating it? Are you truly saying namaste? Are you recognizing the divine that is in them? And the divine that is in them that is also in you that connects the two of you, which means that if they did it, so can you. Right? And not only they did it, therefore so can I, but they did it great and I'm doing it and I'm on my way. And I'm excited for what the future holds. I'm excited for what's coming and I'm excited for what's happening right now. It's incredibly challenging when we face difficulty, as so many of us do, and hardship and suffering, and there are situations that people experience that no one would ever wish on anybody. And trying to reconcile that with a divine connection to earth, a divine connection to a neighbor, a friend, to anybody, it's a pretty dark place. It's a pretty hard stretch for somebody in that type of a situation or who's suffered to that degree. And so to be in that, at that level, and to say there is divinity left still, is a pretty momentous task. The question is, how do we gain the motivation, and how do we gain the strength of character to be able to say through difficult times and through traumatic events, there is divinity in me.
And it almost sounds like something you have to be a monk to get to. I say that because I was listening to a Ram Dass lecture, and he was talking about Tibetan monks being persecuted and how some were taken prisoner and possibly tortured or held captive. And somebody had asked them if they were scared and, how they were doing or how their negative emotions were playing out. And they said the only fear they had was they would lose compassion for their captor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's an amazing, it blows your mind, right?
I mean, I'd like to get to that place in an everyday squabble at work or in a relationship or with a friend. I mean, it's a nice North Star, but how do you get there?
And so to interpret that as well, what you said so eloquently, what they feared was that they would lose the recognition of the divinity in their captor. Whoa. Think about that. It brings chills to you that there is divinity in all of us. That does not mean that there is divinity in the actions of your captor. Don't think for a moment that is. My son is on a mission in Nebraska, And he's always been, when he was with us and in college and playing soccer and an athlete and different things, and he's always been a pretty expressive, somewhat flamboyant, extrinsic type character, really just, yeah, and let's do this, oh, this is fun, and really outgoing. Well, parameters and situations on the mission, too, kind of made him feel a little more internal. He became a bit more internal and started to feel like he was losing some of that. But a flamboyance or just the excitedness about things. And he saw this change in himself of being more internal and being less willing to say things and less willing to express things. And then it actually developed to some point, too, where because he wasn't expressing things, he wasn't standing up for himself, right? And then he began to recognize that because it bothered him more and more, certain things. And he thought that he was being honorable because he wasn't standing up for himself. He thought it was honorable to not say things or to not do these things and just push them away for a time, right? Oh, I'll get through it. I'll suffer through it. But we had to work with him. He said he wrote this to me, and then we talked on the phone a little bit too. And I said, it is actually important, and I can't tell you what the balance is because I don't know you every day in your situation. I don't know that, and the reality is that's why the Native American Indians have I don't know who we even attribute the quote to, right? But it's until you walk a mile in your friend's moccasins or then don't judge him, right? So I think that each individual has their own set of prints that they're making in the sand, and that they have to guide that as well as they can and make it, as I would say, modest, meaning not getting too close to the sun, to bring in some Greek mythology, right? Because if you get too close to the sun in your line, in your path, then you get burned, right? So with him, we really just sat down and talked about, hey, you've got to figure out how to continue to stand up for yourself, but to do it from a place of recognition of the divinity, recognition of the divine, coming from a place of full and complete love when you say things, right? And if you're going to stand up for yourself, or if you're going to act against your captor or tormentor or whoever it is, right, or boss or anyone in any way, it's important to make sure that again comes from a place of recognition of the divinity in them.
I can't just go say namaste to people at work, though. They're going to think I'm crazy. So how do I do this? What do I do?
Yeah, so namaste it's a word, right? And what I loved my linguistics classes in college, and what I learned was that essentially, however people spoke, as long as it communicated, it was fine, right? And that's a very, very basic explanation of linguistics, right? And ultimately, if you're communicating, right, these are words that we use to communicate certain ideals. And the words themselves don't even do it exactly because they have different connotations, and they develop certain connotations in certain groups over time. And, if it's not working for you to say namaste, then do something else.
Just act like it?
Yeah, just be it. Just recognize the divine in them.
You don't want to go around talking about your spiritual practice or that you're the Buddha or whatever. Those are just words, but people will appreciate it if you act as such.
Absolutely. They will totally, wholeheartedly recognize something about you that they appreciate.
How about this? I go into work, or I'm interacting with a former business colleague or relationship or something that's messy in my life, and it shouldn't be conditional, because if I try to do something nice so they're nice to me, that's not the cycle that you want to get into, because you get into trouble that way. How do I approach someone that I have a real difficult time with, and maybe it's not proactively, maybe it's just someone I inevitably see every day, and bring that namaste to the interaction?
So that is the difficulty.
Because it sounds great as we're talking here, but let's go into the messiness of real life and keep it real.
The first thing you have to do is you have to bring. Okay, so here's an experience. When I was a kid, and I remember being taught this, I guess, by my parents, because when I was a kid, we worked on a job, and it was actually in a remote area. It was a cabin, and we were working on this cabin. My dad did construction and cement work and stuff, and there was some conflict that arose. I don't remember because I was a kid. I was maybe 11 or something, but I remember it was a significant conflict, and it was very worrisome for my parents and for all of my family, because we were all involved. My dad, we were his workers. We worked for him. That's what we did. So I remember feeling this thick negative cloud of frustration and irritation. And what my dad did is, I remember one morning we woke up and we all got together as a family and we had a prayer together. We just, like a meditation, right? We had a prayer. And I remember my dad asking that the hearts that were hardened would be softened.
On both sides?
Mm-hmm. And that he would see and be able to communicate in a way that would be heard by him, by the other person, right? So you think about it, oftentimes in difficult situations, we say things, and the other person says something, and we don't seem to really be getting anywhere. And it's like we're not really communicating, right? And we think what we say makes a lot of sense, and we even think we're being generous in what we're saying sometimes. But they don't seem to be satisfied by it, which really blows us away. So sometimes it's the energy internally that we're coming at it by, and other times it's literally a word that we're using that gets someone's brain going a completely different place, right? Or like a trigger for someone. Words are meant to convey certain meaning for people. That's it. That's linguistics. So if you can mash a bunch of words together and put it in a song, someone can cry. It can create an emotional response. That's pretty powerful. And half the time when you read lyrics of songs, you understand what they're saying, but it's not grammatically correct at all. And so it's not about trying to craft the perfect argument. It's about, how do I communicate appropriately or as well as possible with the individual that I'm dealing with or the group that I'm dealing with. And if you can recognize that you, or maybe even the way that you're speaking, might need to change, or the way that you're approaching the situation might need to change, then it goes a long ways for at least getting to that point of saying, okay, I think that one fell, right? I think that idea landed. All right, we seem to be getting on the same page. So I remember that prayer. I remember having that experience. And then I remember going to the job site and just working. I don't remember what happened after that. I really don't. But it was really impressive to me as a young boy that my parents would resolve an internal conflict that they had in that way, with essentially a prayer or a meditation directed at gaining further light and knowledge, right? And being able to be changed internally or externally in some way so that we could find resolution in a harmonious way.
And I can't tell you how many times I've tried to do that at home and I feel totally at peace. I'll meditate. I'll do my yoga. I'll find a place of peace and forgiveness and love. And then I'll get involved with that person again, and it just goes south. And what I've realized is I did all of those things at home attached to the idea that it would make, I'll just tell you, my ex-wife suddenly like me or be happy with me, and everything would be fine. And because I was attached in a conditional way, you think about unconditional, I will love you as you are, no matter what you do. It just is. Conditional is, well, if you do something for me, then I'll be cool with this. And it was a conditional thing. It was, if I do all these things, she will reciprocate. And that's where I got into trouble, is trying to be okay with, no matter what, I just focus on my work. That prayer with your family. It sounds great to think we did this prayer as a family, everything was great, namaste. Doesn't always give you the result you want, but attaching yourself to that result leads to suffering, as opposed to attaching yourself, or maybe not even using that word, just committing to your own work and your own internal vibration around that true feeling of, we are all one, and there's divine in you and there's divine in me, and I can honor that.
Yeah. And it's like, there was a little town, and the people were really focused in this town on security and safety. And they loved security and safety and protecting their town. And so one of the things they wanted to do was to make sure that there was a great big wall of dirt on one side to help protect them and keep them safe. And they would build up this wall of dirt and build up this wall of dirt, and they continued to build up this wall of dirt, and it was very protective for them, and they built it up and built it up. I'm going to put a statement in the middle of this. We often reach out in a sense of feeling like we can control the external environment, or control someone, or control their result. Like we do something thinking, I'm going to do this, and it's going to make this thing happen. We exercise from a sense of control. So this town's building up this great barrier to protect them, to provide control. Well, one day there's this really big storm, and lots of rain comes down, and mudslide decimates the town. So you look at that and you say, well, they attempted to control it, but did they get the result that they wanted? Well, certainly not. Now, does that mean that they shouldn't have acted in that way? I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know. But what I do know is that if their intention was protection, they didn't achieve it. Right? And if our intention with somebody is focused on getting a specific result, we've got to be very careful internally when that result doesn't turn out the way we think it should, right? When something else occurs. And internally, that's why it's more important for us to work on us. There may have been somebody building up and, this is a great job. I've got a great job. I'm piling dirt and I'm protecting this city, and it's great. And but at the same time, they were just doing it from a sense of love and a sense of, this is a wonderful thing for me to do, and I'm active and I'm contributing to society. And then they have this mudslide, and he's not attached to the fact that, that's me, I'm responsible for that entirely. Well, that was a contribution to society that you were hired to do. That's something they needed you to do. They asked you to do, and you were doing that. So that person would actually more easily be able to step away and disconnect himself from that and say, okay, what do I need to do now? Someone who is so attached to the result might decide to say, no, it wasn't the wrong move. We still need to pile dirt. But what we screwed up on was this, right? So they might be more focused on saying, I need to still go down this line. Does that make sense? As far as saying, we don't need to reevaluate this. This is the right thing. This is what I've been working on. This is my life's work. It can't be wrong. Okay?
All right, I'm going to pause you here. I'm totally lost.
Okay.
I know people who are listening, thank you, by the way. Maybe I just had a little bit of a brain fog there, but could we distill it down and start again? Or, okay, the town gets flooded.
Yes.
And they're so focused on the result, but maybe their internal compass was, well, I can't tell you what it was.
Yeah,
I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, no problem. So it's all about the individual, right? The individual. The town was focused on building this barrier for protection. Well, it didn't work. They were focused on control of their environment. That's what they wanted to do. It's all about control. This is the result we're going to get.
The outcome.
Yes. But the outcome or the result was not the one they thought.
But the outcome matters, and goals towards safety have value in society. So
yes,
having a goal and trying to achieve it seems reasonable.
Yes, and it is, exactly. So that's why it is an area where you can easily get off the rails, right? Because it's like, how do I balance having goals, headed in a direction, doing something focused, and then not being attached to the result and the end point of those goals? How do I do that, right?
You become enlightened.
Because if you're attached to the end point, then you're saying, then you're upset, you're frustrated, you're mad, and you're wanting to defend the wall, to defend the mud, the dirt that you piled up, right? And you might even die on that hill, people say, right? We have that phrase often. I wouldn't die on that hill, right? Like, you might not want to focus so much on that argument in your life. And so that sense of control, even though it made sense and seemed to work and was contributing to society and was a beneficial thing and task for you to do, well, it's not working right now, right? It's not working right now. And we had a result ultimately that is considered to be catastrophic to that way of thinking. So now, is it possible for me internally to shift?
Right, that's what I was curious. What is the quote-unquote more optimal way to think about it?
So the optimal way is to not be in control and not be totally attached to the outcome. For me, when I teach my kids this, I say to them, the best way to do this really is to recognize or have faith, have an understanding, or have a projection into the future that you believe that if you aim towards an honorable, virtuous place, whatever that means to you, and you attempt to approximate yourself to this divine nature that is in you and in others, that you're actually going to end up in a better place than you could ever even imagine. People that have died and come back, they describe the other world, right? They describe this next lifetime as, well, indescribable. It's more beautiful, more, some people have said streets paved with gold, and just a variety of just incredibly hard to imagine surroundings, right? Hard to imagine places. So the point that I'm making with that is that where we're headed, if we can grasp and have an understanding that where we're headed and where we're likely going to end up is going to be a better place, it's going to be more grand than we could imagine, then it's okay for us to recognize, okay, when things shift, it's not the end of the world. It's just I was learning something there and I was contributing, and now things shift, and I'm still the same person. I still have the divinity inside of me, right? But now it's nuanced and we've shifted. So we're headed in a slightly different direction. And that course correction or direction is actually beneficial to my end point. And even though I didn't exactly achieve that goal, meaning that I thought that it was going to be somebody attacking us or whatever, and we were going to be protected from maybe wind or something else, maybe I didn't achieve that exact goal. But now I can shift because I'm not totally attached to what I thought we were defending ourselves against, and recognized, oh, we're headed in this direction. This is a more valuable contribution to society at this time for where I am.
And all of our talk about Namaste and divinity, again, I'm drawn back to the Western approach, which we're just coming at it from different directions. You'll hear about it with interviews in sports locker rooms and coaches. We're just focused on the process, man.
The process.
Right?
Development.
I mean, just every day putting in the work.
Yep. That's exactly what it is. When it comes down to it, that's exactly what it is. Every day, a little bit, in your heart, a reevaluation, checking yourself ultimately. Am I in this space? Am I feeling peace? Am I feeling light? Am I feeling love? And am I projecting that into the world around me?
And you told me last podcast, the aim is for peace, light, and love in this world. And as Christy, your colleague in the office, says, wonderful human, believe in what's possible, not probable.
Exactly.
I came in with some negative juju and was talking to her about it. And sometimes just a couple of words crystallized that resonate with you. It just believe in what's possible, not probable. I was like, yeah, I can dig it. I like that. Mm-hmm. Why not? Yeah. It's a lot better than dwelling in the negativity and this is going to happen and then my life's over and...
and it wraps everything up in a little phrase, right? I mean, that's believe in what's possible, not probable, is a very distilled and simplistic way of saying everything that we just tried to say in 5,000 words.
Shall we wrap it up with one word?
Let's do it.
Namaste.
Namaste.